Welcome to the Business Transformation Podcast. My name is Heath Gascoigne, and I'm the host of the Business Transformation Podcast. And this is the show for business transformators who are part business strategists and part business designers, part collaborators and part negotiators who have moved past just design and includes oversight of implementation of those transformations, which means it also includes stakeholder management, coordination, and negotiation. If you work in strategy development and implementation and work to ensure that is aligned to the business design and technology, then you're probably a business transformator. This is the show where we speak to industry experts and professionals to share their stories, strategies, and insights to help you start, turn around, and grow your business transformation. Welcome to the Business Transformation Podcast. And in this episode, we are talking to one of those industry experts. We are talking to Vipin Sigh, who is what we call him right now is it's helping small to medium organizations ahead of their potential sale or increasing the valuation on sale. And we just had a quick conversation offline before starting. Vipin and I, have a common contract or common organization we've worked for together in the past, maybe not the same time or the same location. Vipin is previously a management consultant in financial services at PwC, dealing in finance and strategy and transformation advisory, including operational model design, which is something dear to my heart, as my book is around that, reorganization, business level profitability analysis, risk management, and regulatory compliance. And a few activities in there, mostly including operating model design, restructuring, transformation, liquidity risk management assessments, and especially have a CFA background. There would be a strong focus there on finance. Also, I see there treasury activity called consolidation, risk assumption issues, dependencies, log management, unit testing, planning and tracking. So everything to do from about design and implementation from both the business process, and looks like from the technical side. Wow. So a lot of experience there, as well as just more recently as director at consulting and analytics at Visa. And then you also sit on the board there at Ponce Bank as an advisory board member and a principal consultant at Vaunce Consulting, advising small to medium-sized businesses, including startups, on strategy, finance, and risk management. And most recently, which we were just talking about briefly, about Vipin's current role in advising small to medium organizations increasing their valuation ahead of sale. Or potentially going for sale. And we were talking just offline there about something that I find is of big interest about where the organization makes changes is in its processes. And Vipin talked about there's some common things that need to be done in terms of increasing valuation. And one of those is very well having the organization documented. Now, I've worked on big projects that have had thousands of staff impacted, 50 odd locations around the country. They've been running the organization for 20 plus years, and they have nothing documented. And so Vipin, from your perspective, when you go into the clients and these small to medium organizations, I'd imagine at some point in time they've got some form of documentation. What happens? What sort of form of documentation are you finding? They well understand the level they need. It's consistent. It's in a good standard. If there's no standard, what happens? What do you do?
Yes. So thank you for having me on this. And most of my comments will be focused on small and medium-sized businesses. We can definitely jump into conversations on what the big businesses do. But I guess you'll have other guests to talk about that as well, because my past was working with very large banks and financial institutions. So they have a very different structure, given all the regulators who are constantly monitoring them. But when we talk about small businesses, I would say that what I see is a lot of disparity in terms of how they are documenting their processes and procedures. Most of them, I would say, in the small business space, Main Street businesses don't have anything when it comes to process documentation. They would love to have it, but they don't. I've also seen some businesses which are doing millions of dollars in revenue, but they don't even have a website. So
Wow.
if I was to start my documentation, I would say that most businesses should obviously be looking at and starting with sales and marketing, and that's where your revenue starts. So before you start thinking about documenting your HR processes and some of the other back office processes, you need to start looking at how you're selling your product. What does your product mean? What does it stand for? Why are you in business? What was the reason that you started your business? And having a website is a good starting point, so you can put some of this information for other people to have some context. But I
Mhm.
believe that a lot of the small businesses are essentially running out of the relationship that the owner has built over time.
Yeah.
And maybe the business is more than 30, 40 years old before internet was a big thing.
Yeah.
And the owner never got around to building that website or hiring someone to build that website. He or she doesn't believe in having a web presence. So they never spent time on it. But I think that should be the starting point. And beyond that, we can talk about documenting your financials well, because that's a very important part of any business valuation. That's where typically the questions start.
Yeah.
So we need to have a good sense of our revenue, our expenses, our seasonality, anything we have in terms of our customer data. If there is customer concentration issues, a new buyer could get concerned about it. So you need to have good information on all of these areas.
Okay. So you have an approach that you follow, and that approach usually starts with understanding, first of all, the big question is, well, is what form of documentation do you have for the organization in terms of, let's say, its operating model? What do you currently
Yeah.
have it operate? What do you currently have it documented? And then your starting point there is externally, how are you achieving sales? And what's that
Hmm.
process, sales and marketing look like? And then you bring it
Yes.
in house and go, okay, now their back office to support that ability to make the organization to make sales is the back office work, maybe HR, the finance, how things are receipt, money is received, goods are created and sold and it's shipped, etc. So, Eva, is there even a point before that about, I think you mentioned about why they're in business,
Hmm.
like the vision maybe or mission. Where does that come into it, if at all?
So I think that's very important, because we are trying to sell a business which, in essence, is an idea or someone's idea. It started as in someone's garage or someone's back office, and you need that story, that passion to be conveyed to a buyer. And that's what we are trying to get to when we are asking about why are you in this business. So
Mm-hmm.
everyone can understand the numbers, everyone can figure out how the business makes money, but is there a fundamental reason for this business to exist? Or if a new technology comes around, will that business sort of disappear because that fundamental reason will get challenged? So if someone is just monetizing a trend which maybe will not be long lasting, that
Yep.
business might not have a lot of buyers. Whereas if someone is doing something which is deeply rooted in the community and has certain fundamental beliefs behind it, and is kind of transformational and has applications for a broader society, then that's a business that really has legs and can grow a lot. So that's
Okay.
what we are looking for.
So so in terms of, let's say, your potential clients, there are a couple of things that the business has scale. And I think you mentioned this earlier on the call before we started, was um, in terms of revenue, how big do they need to be, and what sort of times revenue do when you start, does it usually have like a one or two times X times, or and after you finish
Right.
and put these documentation in place, and a new operating model, or a new strategy to take them to the next level or next genre, um, what sort of times through doing this work, if you were to sell it to a client, say, okay, you currently got some form of documentation, it's you have a one X times your revenue valuation right now, and we do this piece of work, it's going to take us 3 to 6 months, and we might out of that maybe generate some more revenue, or maybe we don't. We should expect an uptick of 3 to 5 times valuation. How is there
Right.
a formula you use?
So it's not a formula-based approach. It's more about telling people how the market typically looks at it. So we in our business brokerage world, we look at main street businesses, which are the smallest businesses like a hair salon, a dry cleaner, a laundromat, a liquor store, a restaurant, and we go up to lower middle market size businesses, which could be 10 to 20 to 30 million dollars in revenue or value. And these could be small manufacturing, construction companies, distribution warehousing companies. So what we are telling our customers is that there is a difference in how businesses are valued based on the size,
Hmm.
and the size is in a lot of instances driven by how well managed the business is.
Okay.
So if it's a single person or a single location restaurant, it'll operate at a very different multiple as compared to a franchised location that has hundreds of stores all over the country.
Sure.
Because to get to that point where you are operating hundreds of stores, you need a very well tested model. So it could be a franchise like a
Mhm.
McDonald's or a Burger King, or it could be other big chains like Darden Restaurants has chains like Red Lobster, etc., where you would need professional management, you will need documented processes, you will need a strong team that would have to follow all these processes, because it's not just about documenting the processes, it's also about implementing and following those processes and
Uh-huh.
improving those processes over time.
All
So
right.
all of that matters. So in terms of, directly answering your multiple question, when we look at very small businesses, the multiples are more like 1 or 2 times earnings. So not revenue but earnings, in terms of what the owner is able to keep for himself or herself.
You mean net
But
profit
as
as in earnings?
their profit, yeah, but as these businesses start growing and they cross, say, $1 million in profit, then those multiples are more like 2 or 3 times. Now, if we are able to take this business to a $5 million in profits, now we are going to talk about 4 to 5 to 6 times. So the numbers change as your business becomes more sizable,
Hmm.
and a lot of that is because of those processes that are needed to make that business sizable.
Okay, so when I come onto big projects and I generally talking three things. There's a current state, there's a future state, and then there's a transformation to get from A to B. And in
Mhm.
most cases, the current state is uh, ad hoc. Processes are ad hoc, done reactively. There's no standardization to it. There is very little documentation or inconsistent or out of date. And then the future state looks like it's the almost the mirage on the horizon. It's a beautiful thing, and if it's almost intangible or unrealistic that they could ever get there. And then trying to sell it to the client that we need to document at least some part of it. Like I've been on a large government um, transformation. They had 53 sites around the country, and they wanted to reduce them down to three. And the head count was like 1,500 down to 450, but they were going to reallocate those staff to different parts of the government organisation. And so my starting point was we need to baseline the current operating model. And the sponsor said, look, Heath, there's 53 sites around the country and they do business 53 different ways. And I said, great, just show me one. We'll choose one and we'll call it the best case or benchmark. For some, it's going to be aspirational, but for some, it's going to be below par. But it's going to be achievable for everyone. And that's going to represent best practice. And then he says, well, I disagree. But at the end, he agreed. Um, but at the end of it, after all said and done, after the project was finished and the delivery was asked, he said three things. Thanks for the target operating model and the roadmap, but also the third thing is you documented the undocumented business. And I said, wow, there is the thing that scared him, and I think it scares a lot of clients, is that when they get consultants turn up and say, we want to document what you do today, and then they think, oh my goodness, we're going to spend forever documenting how things are today. And like this sponsor said, look, they've been living the pain for 20 years. They know what the pain is. They live it every single day. And I said, yeah,
Yeah.
but you talk to 10 different people and they got 10 different views of the same pain, and not two views are the same. So let's just agree on one view. And so how do you encounter that and how do you get around it?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I entered business brokerage, and you mentioned in your introduction that I have another consulting company, Vouch Consulting,
Yep.
was essentially what you just described, that I sort of tested the market in my own way and spoke with a few of my friends and colleagues and, a few potential clients, and understood that people have this hesitation when they think of consultants. They think that this is an unending project.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see an outcome at the end of it.
Yep.
We don't know the value that the consultant would deliver. So why even bother, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
business brokerage to me was a more tangible value proposition for
Mm-hmm.
someone who's looking to sell their business. We bring to them market insights based on our experiences. So Murphy, the company that I'm showcasing here in
Yep.
my background,
Mm-hmm.
it's a national business brokerage company. We have 100 plus offices in US and Canada,
Whoa.
200 plus agents and advisors. So when I am talking on behalf of Murphy, I'm sharing experiences that I'm gathering from all these different individuals who are in the market on a
Mm-hmm.
regular basis, dealing with different industries, different issues, different challenges.
Yep.
So the hope and belief is that the clients value that diverse perspective. They are not just hiring me for my experience, but they are hiring me for the collective experiences that I bring to the table.
Yep.
And I think that's resonating much better than if I was trying to go at it on my own.
Uh-huh.
Some people are very successful doing it on their own and build their own brand, and that's great. But I felt that especially when it comes to helping a business owner from a different industry, unless you have that experience, you can't really talk intelligently about it. And that's what I wanted to do. And to help all different small businesses, I wanted that team, and that's how I approached the market.
Okay, so you've got some good leverage there by having a broad team, a diverse team, and possibly the national wide team as well as into Canada. So you've got a lot of leverage that you can pull on there for other various things. From a client's perspective, probably a similar company like theirs that have gone through a similar
Hmm.
process, and then you have an approach that you can show this is what it's going to look like and the value it can provide. So if like I think the big like you said it, and I see the similar kind of struggle with clients that I go and see when they think they're going to call in a consultant. And I think the three E's of really calling in a consultant is for the efficient, effective, and the expertise, the experience, and efficiency. You that's the reason why you bring in a consultant. They've done it before. They have experience. The expertise, they're good at it, and efficient that they're going to do it fast. They're not going to learn on the job and learn themselves, but because they've done it before. Um, so when you like the hardest part that I see that coming onto these big projects and the like that example with the 53 sites, the sponsor said, I said, look, there's 6 steps to my process. And number 5 is design. After we've worked out, our vision, our governance, our current operating model, our benefits of what we want to get and changes. And then 5 is design, where we put all the changes that we've agreed within the scope of the project, address the pain, etc. And he said, this is step 5 design. And he says, great. I want you to start at number 5. And I said, whoa, you want me to start at number 5 without first understanding step number 1, the focus, why we're here doing this in the first place. Step number 2, the control and governance, make sure we've got the right people in the room taking the decisions from the right people, and scope of our design principles, in scope for the project, and we're managing our risks and assumptions. And our step 3 about understanding the current operating model and pains and opportunities we want to take advantage of. So you want me to start at 5 without even understanding any of that? And he said, yes. And his scariest thing was when he said there's 53 locations around the country, there's 53 different ways of doing it. Because he thought that if we're going to understand the current operating model, we're going to be there forever understanding what they do today. And this, I think I've seen it before, and even recent clients, that this process mapping part, which I feel is it's a major part, to understanding what people do in their processes on a day-to-day basis, is little cottage industries are being created around process mapping, and even to the point where the business users have been told to go to a specialist 2-day offsite training to learn how to use or do process mapping. So, well, um, I don't think the business actually need to do a 2-day course on how to do process mapping. It's the consultants that will do the mapping. The business just needs to understand the maps, not need to be certified in the process mapping. So how do you go about that part of when you said, okay, we need to document the as is state? I'm sure you get some pushback from the business. You go, okay, we've got a quick way of doing this. There's 2 ways. We do light touch, or we do it in the detail. How do you go about that?
So in our world, when a business owner wants us to jump to step 5 and not spend time on the first 4 steps,
Yep.
we typically have partners who are specialists in each of those areas. And for example, if someone is just looking for legal advice, we would have a partner who has been in the legal space, is licensed to provide legal advice in that state, and we can easily refer them to that individual, because what we want to avoid is spinning our wheel, having a client struggle with the process, not
Yep.
being able to understand why it's taking so long,
Mm.
and then thinking that we are charging them for something that they don't really need.
Yeah.
So in the business brokerage world, we try and keep it simple. But if I put my consultant hat on, I definitely agree that if I was trying to help a client end to end, and if someone says, start with the last step first, and I don't have the current assessment, I don't understand the process, they don't want me to do the process mapping,
Yep.
it's going to be very challenging. And I would ask them to either bring to me those process maps that they think they have,
Yep.
or if they want me to design it, then they would need to walk me through their process so I can design it for them, right? So
But
there,
there's
there
no
are no
avoiding it.
shortcuts.
There's
Yes.
no avoiding it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the points you made about the leadership agreeing and thanking you at the end,
Yep.
I feel like most of the transformation projects are successful or they fail because of the leadership.
Yeah.
So if the main person at the top who controls the budget and has the authority to make decisions is with you, behind you,
Yep.
that project will be successful.
Yeah.
There will be problems, there will be team members, and out of the 53 locations, maybe 50 will fight you and not want to help you and want to do things their way.
Yep.
But if you have the support of the main person who
Yeah.
owns the company or who has the budget, and he's the one who has hired you, you can work through all of that.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that, and if you're constantly arguing with that individual, and you're getting into discussions which derail you all the time, that is going to be a very challenging project, which I think at the end you might earn some fees out of it, but the client might not be happy. A lot of
Yeah.
this is referral based. So you want to have a happy client at the end of it. So step 1 should always be to figure out, is the client going to be on board with your approach? Does
Yep.
he or she appreciate the value that you bring to the table? Is there mutual respect between the two of you, where you understand that they are hiring you for a reason, and that reason is very clear? It's not, I doubt you, but I'll bring you on, let's see how it goes. Those projects are very challenging.
Yeah. 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 You win these. I'm on a current client at the moment who they thought that their project was to they have a process of managing their capital projects, and without giving too much away, this one project process called the common project process was one process common, and now has morphed into about a dozen. And my instruction was to crush them all together, harmonize them, and then digitalize it. And I said, wait a minute. So you've this one common process was not fit for purpose. So people made it fit for their own purpose, and they created 12 versions of it. And now you want to be crushing them together and digitalize it. And I said, the reason why it's separated because it wasn't fit for purpose, but now you're trying to make them all into one process. I don't think that's what you really want to do. I said, and then you've told me that you're in one market at the moment and you want to be into multiple markets, but you want to integrate them all together. I said, I'll tell you what's happening with your process, right? Your process is doing not that. They said, we want to optimize it. I said, what you're actually doing for this capital projects process is that you're doing two things. You're creating or enhancing existing business capabilities. Either that's going to stay with the business and make money, or it's going to stay with the business and you're going to lose money. But if you do it really well, you will make money, but you reuse these assets again, these business capabilities, and it will allow you to execute your projects faster, with less risk, with less duplication, and you can turn the ship whenever you want. And they said, yeah, that's what we should do. That's what we want to do. I said, but that's not what you told me. You told me something completely different. And I said, and now you called the project optimization. I said, optimization is making us faster. And I said, if you want to be faster, we're still going to head straight into the rocks. I think what you're trying to do is you're trying to turn at the same time. So that's transformation. They said, yeah, that's what we want. And I said, okay, now if we're going, I recommend we make a change to the project name and get rid of this optimization, because we're not doing optimization, we're doing transformation. And now, because we're now a transformation, I'm going to talk about the big elephant in the room behind us. And that big elephant is these transformation projects have got a massive 70% failure rate. And you talked about the key part there. I said, look, the four reasons of transformation failure. First one is lack of business user involvement. Number two is lack of senior leadership support, changing requirements and incomplete requirements. I said, I think we're pretty good on this business user. We've got a lot of engagement, but we definitely are lacking in this leadership. And they said, yeah, we are. And I said, so now we know what we're lacking in. It's not let's say, okay, we're lacking in it, and that's it. No, who's going to fill the void? If you had perfectly, you said it. If without that leadership, you're dead in the water, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and yeah, these days there are tools like RPA tools, right? Where if you want to optimize a process and digitize it, you can do it. But to do that, step one is to figure out that is your process working well right now? Because if you automate a bad process,
yes,
you'll just end up repeating the bad process several times. You don't want to do
yeah,
that. So
rubbish in,
step
rubbish
one
out,
is to
faster.
just exactly.
Yeah, so yeah, I generally find that, and I actually have a couple of guests on recently, and they are technology guys, and so their preference, I think, their confirmation bias or their natural deposition would be technology. This is a hammer, and every problem is technology, and therefore this technology must solve all problems. But they would even say, you know, technology is the enabler to first understanding what was the problem, and then if technology was part of the solution, then yes. But instead of, like, there's a lot of, I've seen guys even in this current project who have a background in RPA, and they are just chomping at the bits. So let's see if we can automate the hell out of this thing. I think, whoa, automate what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Automate a broken process so you end up with lots of broken pieces and nothing works.
Yeah.
And then yeah, you're creating a disaster. It's like a Frankenstein that no one wants.
Yeah, it's
So
almost like I see that with risk management is, and risk management, it's like at the start of a project, there's a risk management meeting that runs for a couple of hours, and people were told they have to turn up, and they turn up and they go, oh, here's 2 hours of my life I'll never get back, but I'm going to unload all the possible raids that I can possibly think of. And just now
yeah,
that it's registered in a log, I hope to hell that I'll never hear again about it. And they think the actual documentation or the recording of a risk in a raid in a risk log is now managing the risk. No, that's called recording the risk. And then
yeah,
the no one manages it, no visibility of it throughout the whole process until one day there's a massive issue where that risk has now become an issue, and now everyone has to down tools for, in some cases, a couple of days or for a week. Going, oh, I have to put this fire out now, and then everyone else is, yeah. So do you find that?
yeah. So talking about risk, as I spent a bunch of time doing that with banks. So it's never about just documenting the risk. It starts with assessment of risk. It goes down deeper into identifying each and every risk. So what you just said, yes, you need to start with logging all the risks that you can see and foresee. But then the journey just starts there. Then you have to talk
Mm.
about how do you remediate those risks, how do you mitigate those risks, how do you address those risks, what is the risk that you sort of leave on the table, because you can never eliminate all the risk.
Yeah.
Part of the reason a business owner runs a business is because he or she is almost enjoying managing a certain amount of risk. And when you manage risk, that's when you get your returns. If
Mm.
you eliminate risk, then you might as well keep all your money in like a savings account, and there's no risk there, I guess, if
Yeah.
if it's
No
insured
risk,
and
no
all.
return. Yeah.
So yeah, so to get any return, you have to have risk, but you need to manage the risk. And
Mm.
you know good business owners, in my view, are good risk managers, and they kind of know going into any decision what their downside is, what their upside is, and they're constantly balancing those two. For my downside of X $1,000, my upside is X $1 million, right? So yes,
Yep.
this is a good decision to make, and I'll go into it. It's not like gambling. It's a much better probability of success. That's what
Calculated.
people are doing. And yeah, the more you can calculate, and again, going back to our conversational process, you get better at it when you start documenting how you decided on making a decision. You need
Mm-hmm.
to have that log in some way or form, that last year you made these 5 decisions in your 1 year budget. These were your assumptions that you will grow these products, you will grow in these customer segments, and this is the outcome now. So
Mm-hmm.
let's see what worked, what didn't work.
Yep.
Let's then improvise upon areas which did not work well. And if something worked well, let's put more gas on it. Let's automate that piece, because that we know is working very well. That's
Mm-hmm.
where I need to digitize it and put the rocket fuel on it. But then there
Okay.
are some areas where things are going out of control, and I need to keep it close to me. I need to run it manually. I want to be talking to that customer because that's the high risk, high reward customer. I cannot have, an offshore location take care of that customer. I cannot automate it and have a bot take care of a certain issue, because it's a high risk issue.
Yep.
So that's how you kind of create your matrix, and you decide which ones are ready for automation or not.
Okay, so a couple of things in there. One about past decisions, or this. I think you're talking about record keeping around decision making, about the assumptions that are made, or informed, or going into a why decisions were made, and then historically looking back about what were those assumptions. I've been in meetings where previous board decisions were unpicked, because people were either the the membership of that board was agreed, but the delegates who would now be part of a quorum of decision making, not that quorum wasn't, let's say, agreed. So then people later on would unpick the decisions that that board made, and then when they go in a circle of, oh my goodness, we're getting nowhere now because people are unpicking past decisions. So how do you encounter that, and how do you get around it?
So I think going back on a decision, in my view, if it's for the right reasons, it's probably okay. I don't really see that as much, because especially again in the small business world, some of this is not very well documented. So
Mm-hmm.
board meetings are more of a formality, that people might have something to file their annual report with the state regulator, but they're not really having a board meeting. Most of the decisions are made outside the board. But I personally think that it's good to have a discipline around having that board structure. Have
Yep.
some outside board members who are experts in their field, who can challenge you and question you, so you're not just kind of sitting in an echo chamber, and
Yeah.
people are just nodding to whatever you say. So there's value in having a board. But yeah, if someone wants to make a change to a board decision, it should go through a formal review process.
Mm-hmm.
If possible, again, people should lay it out as to why they disagree with a certain board decision, and maybe there's value in their disagreement. And if that's the right thing to do for the business, there's nothing wrong with changing. Now, it shouldn't be constant and all the time, and you
Yeah.
want to have some direction that you're following. And if you're changing your decisions constantly, that sort of reflects poorly on your board's capabilities of making good long-term decision.
Yep.
But if you've invested enough time in a certain approach and it's not working, and you can show it with data, and you have experts behind a change in approach,
Mm-hmm.
it's worth consideration.
Okay, so you, with your board structures that you recommend for your clients, like on my projects, I recommend at the project level, we'll take a decisions up to a design authority, which is basically made of a business design authority that you separate business and technology, and business leaders will talk only about business, mostly because technology guys are so familiar and so used to these design authority meetings that if the business themselves have not got their ducks lined up and they go to a meeting with technology guys, and technology guys have, in most cases of these big transformations, they they have, because money is spent on technology, they effectively have the talking stick, and whatever they say, or say is recommended or goes. So if business goes to a meeting with technology guys and they haven't got their ducks in line, the technology guys will just eat them alive. So I recommend business design authority separately from the technical design authority, and then they collectively come together in a solution design. And if they need to, from that point, take it to a project board or program board at the executive level and say, okay, the business have agreed on this, technology have agreed on this, we've collectively come together, and now we want to get this approved. You're also talking, I think, similar, but also with external governance, with maybe non-executive director boards that have an executive, they have more like, say, industry expertise that they
Yeah,
are offering. Yeah. Is
yeah,
that
yeah,
common?
and
Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, I think it's common, it's recommended, but again, it's more of a big, large company structure concept. Smaller companies typically don't really have that, but then there are other groups where business owners can participate in. It's like a local chamber of commerce. You could have other industry associations where business owners can go and share ideas and get
Mm-hmm.
feedback.
Yep.
But a well-structured board is definitely a valuable resource to have, and that's what advisors are for. That's what consultants can add value in.
Yep.
So it's not just delivering on one project and then finishing it. It could be a longer-term relationship with a board advisor who can constantly keep you updated on what's happening in the world of business, what they have seen in other companies.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're running your company, you need that input from other competitors and peer group
Yep.
resources as well.
I've seen um, uh, for advisory boards, they have uh, different structures for, let's say, structure as in remuneration, because there's some that'll work on pro bono for free, and they'll get some that'll work on that. Because some you get advisory boards where you might want to get a celebrity, a person who sits on your board who doesn't do anything other than looks good on a presentation, or you get guys that are they pick up a phone and they make connections, or even a third level, maybe if there's such a thing, that they pick up the phone and they do recruiting.
Yeah, yeah, all of those. I think even large companies use that approach. There are non-executive chairmen of large banks who are essentially there because they have the strong client relationships.
Yeah.
So they are in a way recruiting new clients, keeping existing client relationships going. They are sort of the voice for their industry. They sit on the board. They also talk to the legislators and the government when it comes to lobbying for certain benefits or provisions in a
Uh-huh.
new law, or something happens in the country where you need voice of the industry in the Congress or the government, wherever the decisions are made. So a lot of these roles are very important.
Okay, so this really ties in with that leadership part, but into with transformations and change projects. Without the leadership, and you're going to struggle. This is leadership, but this is possibly external expertise that have that advise on the, because when I talk about transformation and the work that I do, is really with three parts. So I call it the three L's: layers, levels, layers, and language. There's layers within the organization: strategic, operation, and implementation projects, and they speak a different language. it's strategic. They speak, market share, return on investment, big conceptual issues, macro level. And then operations is dealing at like turnover, staff turnover, attendance at a different, their language is different. And then a
Yeah.
level of detail is different. And of course, at project level, at business process mapping and notation and developers and code, that language is another language, and the level of detail is like the nth degree level of detail. So when you're talking, about leadership there, you're talking with external advisory board. This is at the strategic level. What
Right.
about at the operation level? What sort of leadership is there? You focus
So
on that?
yeah, so I think from an operational point of view, it's more about people skills. It's more about having empathy for what everyone else is bringing to the table. And if you're in a role where you're managing people, you need to be sort of a little more clued into what's going on in the employees' personal lives beyond just the day-to-day work, because you kind of, as much as you want to separate work from personal life, they are not truly separated. If someone is having a bad day at home, it'll have an impact on his or her work, and vice
Yeah,
versa. So I think when it comes to operational leadership, people need to have stronger understanding of where their team is emotionally, and how to manage resources. You need to have enough experience to provide good guidance. You need to have respect for everyone's contribution to the team. If there is something that requires your own intervention, you should be willing to roll up your sleeves and do it.
yeah,
As it's all about the servant leadership model. It's not about you give directions and expect people to follow directions. You have to be willing to be the leader who is going to bring coffee for the team while the team is delivering results for you.
yeah.
So you need to keep them happy.
Okay, so there's, I think your summary there would be emotional intelligence for your team, that so that you understand
Yeah.
understand your team. I think what in this, like, and how not so long ago, the focus of outsourcing roles to India or low cost locations, and it was a big thing. It's very trendy to outsource offshore a lot of roles, and then it wasn't, and then they brought a lot of roles back onshore. Um, and for many different reasons, even though it was more expensive to bring the roles back onshore, I think some of the unintentional side effects of, or let's say knock-on effects of offshoring was the customer experience wasn't as they'd hoped. The customer support and service wasn't to the same level. Um, and I think what I'm seeing now with working from home is that what there is, I say, there's no spokesperson right now I can see for culture. What is, I think like Apple would be probably famous for their culture, as is Facebook, as Google. A lot of, I think, offices around the world modeled themselves off Google with their everything playful, because everyone would, this creative zones, and now everyone's working remote from their
Yeah.
home. The thing that no one's talking about is that the culture is getting killed. What do you think?
Yeah, so that's a big part of what I think is going to be the challenge for the next generation of leaders, because I don't think this work from home phenomenon is going away. It's not just a COVID phenomenon that after this phase ends, people are going to rush back to their offices. So whoever is going to be in a position where they have to lead people needs to get well versed with creating that culture without having everyone sit in front of you, without the ping pong tables and
Yeah.
free snacks and food, because culture was always much more than that.
Mm.
Some companies tried to bring it down to that level where they felt that just a nice office with all the facilities is enough, whereas how we treat employees, how we talk to them, how they talk to each other doesn't matter. But
Mm.
I think that truly matters, and
Oh
that's
yes.
something that when people are working remotely, that's what they would really want to know and understand and feel.
Yep.
And there is a company that I'm working with, going back to my working from India days, and they are trying to bring that into their ethos, where
Uh-huh.
they are they are providing offshore services, but from a remote work model perspective. And their philosophy is that if the employee experience is good, the customer experience has to be good. So
Mm.
they start with the employee experience first. They want to make sure that their culture is well respected by their employees, and they are sure that that'll help the customers also feel the same level of
I think that's
service. And
it's very admirable to the employee experience will translate into a good customer experience.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, very nice, very nice. Okay, so now that you, as a what would you call yourself, a business, the brokerage and the business brokerage firm, would you call it business brokerage consultant, or is that that's the title?
It's Yeah, the title is just a business broker. Sometimes we
Uh-huh.
call ourselves business intermediaries or business transition specialists. But essentially, we are matching buyers and sellers. So similar to real estate brokers who would help with buying and selling real estate, we
Yep.
help with the buying and selling of businesses. So I have no qualms in using the phrase business broker. Sometimes it's not considered to be as trendy. So some of the people who do higher ticket deals, they would call themselves M&A advisors.
Okay.
Obviously,
All right.
at a higher level, it becomes investment bankers. But
Yep.
I could be like an investment banker for Main Street or lower middle market companies. So doesn't matter. It's the same work.
Okay, so the takeaways of, say, if a for a particular prospective client for you, your approach of when you get engaged, one of the first things you do to sum up what we've just talked to, the main parts, is that you're a big fan of documentation, and that you need to have some form of your organization, your operating model documented. I think for not just a business owner's perspective, but a consultant going into a new engagement with a client, look at me and this and the government there with their 53 sites, or even the previous clients, that you've got to have your organization documented. Now there's a way in about you do it. You don't want to over engineer and spend forever creating a little cottage industry, but you need to have a baseline. So that's the starting point. Your approach is that sales is crucial. So let's make sure that we understand the sales and marketing process first, so that we know how we are winning business, getting business, servicing clients, and to bring that from external facing to internal, to getting our backyard, back office sorted. Make sure that those processes are, let's say, at least documented before we start improving them. I think
Yeah.
you talked about earlier about basically rubbish in, rubbish out. Robotic process automation. What are you going to automate if it's your process is rubbish? Then there's no point in that.
Yeah.
The technology guys would just go, let's just automate everything anyway, and then you just lose a lot of time and money because you've just automated a rubbish process. So that's
Yeah.
the starting point. There's a few, and you talk because you're let's say the focus, but the financial side. We didn't talk specifically around the main report, so I'd assume the profit and loss, the balance sheet, cash flow.
Mhm.
Um, any other particular? Um,
No, in terms of those are the main financial statements.
yeah,
Some business owners, they don't even have that, so we have to just rely upon their cash register. Show us your sales from whatever you can on your point of sale system.
mhm,
But income statement, balance sheet, cash flow statement, tax returns are important because we want to see something that is that's something you're paying taxes on,
yeah,
because otherwise there's a risk that someone is inflating their revenue or inflating their earnings because they're trying to sell at a high value.
uh-huh,
So we want to see tax returns to confirm that it's a reliable number.
and these would have to be audited returns, right?
Ideally, sometimes they are, sometimes they are not. Especially for smaller companies, it's not audited. So we might get something that CPA, an auditor, has prepared, but sometimes that's not the case.
Okay, when you say smaller, so we're talking smaller as in less than $1 million revenue or less than
Less
5?
than $1 million.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And you talked about some of the fundamentals. So fundamentals being like their vision, their mission, make sure their organization's business's fundamental objective, why they're in business for in the first place. I think that you mentioned a key risk there about if the business is really just developed from the owner's own relationship with a particular client, that could be a risk to the for the organization, as there's a key supplier or key customer risk if that one customer leaves. So I think from a consultant's perspective, or even in a particular consultant going into a client, you'd want to first understand the current operating model and have that documented. You're looking at external, how they attract and win business. Their back office is how they are supporting those sales and marketing activities. They're making sure that their the vision and mission is very clear, like I talk about in the vision into our strategies, and so that each strategy has an objective, and each of those objectives has a measure. This is how we can measure our progress towards achieving those objectives, and also then we know when we have, like a SMART concept, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timeout. So we have all those. You talked a lot about, well, there was, when in terms of documentation, it wasn't just having these documented, it was these are documented as well as this is what the businesses are actually doing, what they are actually using for implementation. Because there's one thing to have it documented, which is, I've seen beautiful PowerPoint presentations that are a thing of art. But the business look at it and go, that's interesting, but how does it help me?
Yeah. It's not implementable. It maybe has good visual appeal, but has no appeal to the employees who need to understand and implement it. So yeah, the value of PowerPoint presentation sometimes is limited when it comes to actual implementation. That's where you need to get into more details, and
So
Word documents, things like that work better.
So you Word, So it's, I think there's there's a million tools out there, and I think it is that the key is to use the right tool for the audience, as opposed to, as I've been on previous projects where they sent the business off to learn business process modeling notation, BPMN, and they forced the business to use business process modeling notation on any process maps that they were created. And it's like, how's that?
Yeah.
And I even see it. It's not a very, so it's like a normal presentation, understanding your audience, and then using whatever tool or language is appropriate for that audience.
Correct.
Yeah. And you talked about leadership, which is a big thing. And there was two types of leadership there. There was, or three types, maybe the strategic leadership, to make sure that you've got the support on your projects. There's operational leadership, and you talked about, I summarized that and said and emotional intelligence, to understanding your team. And you talked about making sure that employee experience is good, and then because that will translate into a good customer experience, which I am a big fan of. I think that's logical. Some people might not understand that. I think it might be a bit of leap of faith. And you also talk about external leadership, by using external parties, not maybe the non-executive directors, or external boards that have that offer that external perspective at the strategic level. Yep. Okay. And the last one was about the ethos. That you're seeing this as a new trend. This was about the employee experience onto translating into customer experience, making sure that the employees are happy first. Employees are happy, customers will be happy.
That's right. Yeah, and I'm probably borrowing from Sir Richard Branson. I think that's his key message. Every time he talks about this, he's always keeping that front and center.
Mr. Branson. Yes, there is a quote of his that I quite using all the time about simplicity and complexity. About anyone can make something well, I think idiot can make something complicated. The genius is in simplicity. Is to make
Hmm.
it's words to that effect. It's to making it simple.
Yeah. Even Albert Einstein, I think, had said something similar. Given how smart he was, he believed in simplicity. If you can't explain something in a few words, you haven't
You don't
understood it.
exactly. Yeah, there's a beauty. That's a quote. I'm going to quote you on that one, Vipin. Okay. All right. So Vipin, thank you very much. That was as a final takeaway for our guests of similar transformation backgrounds and consultants, and even um, maybe business owners that are going to do what you are doing here and helping them increasing their valuation. What would be the three takeaways for that you'd leave for them to say, okay, if you're about to go for a sale or increase your valuation, the three main things that you would do to either they make a step change to make this happen faster. Watch out for the roadblocks. These things will always hang you up. What they be? What the three things for them to look out for?
Right. So I would start with it should be a business that if you were going to buy something now, you would
Mm-hmm.
buy it yourself. So don't try to hand over a hot potato to someone else, hoping that
Uh-huh.
people won't figure it out. And you are done with it, so you're just too tired to run it, and someone else will run it for you. It
Yep.
should be a business that is appealing even for you, and only because you're maybe at a point where you truly are just looking for young blood to take it over. That's why you are looking to sell. Number two would be that financials are very important, and one needs to give it time for business financials to be at a point where it's going to pass the muster of due diligence.
Mm-hmm.
Buyers really dig into the numbers, and you need to have good financials. You might need good accountants, CPAs to help you with that, but focus on your financials before you list. And number three would be that give it some time. So don't try to sell a business in panic. It's almost like you should be selling your business when you don't really need to sell your business.
Mm.
Because if you are in a rush, if you feel like you've run out of options, the buyers will sense it. You won't really get good value for your business. So you need to give yourself time. Business should be growing, doing well. Should not be in a downfall. No one wants to catch a falling knife.
Yep.
So you need to make sure that it's the business is positioned for success. And then you'll have lots of buyers. You'll get the value you look for. You'll be able to sell it quickly. You won't have any of the challenges that a lot of small business owners face. But all of that, I said, it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
So if you need more advice, more guidance, talk to people like me or advisors like you. We position businesses for success, and be willing to ask for help. There's plenty out there.
Okay. Awesome. Very good. So I will put your contact details in the show notes so people can get a hold of you to if, wonder if they're pricing their business or about to go through this process. Um,
Yeah.
when you say when it's growth, with the growth, when the business is growing, do you talk about ultimately it's a double digit growth they should be, or should these business owners should go, okay, single digit growth is still good. Um,
So some of the growth is dependent on the economy, the kind of business it is. Like if it's a restaurant, if it's a very sort of main street business, promising double-digit growth will be wrong on our part. It is all about what's the demand. If it's a technology business which has huge demand in front of it, their double-digit growth might be very easy. So growth depends on several factors. The new owner should be willing to spend on growing the business in terms of marketing, etc. Hiring more employees.
mhm.
So yes, growth can come, but it can come at a cost. So are
Yeah.
you willing to leverage your business and grow it faster, or do you want to stay away from leverage and grow it slowly? So some business owners don't want leverage, and they would rather just grow slowly. So that's not, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so depending on industry, depending on the economic cycle, growth results can vary a lot.
Okay. Awesome. So yep. So it's no cookie cutter. approach. It's it's almost bespoke to each organization or each company based on many things, including the industry they're in. All right, okay, Vipin, we'll wrap it up there.
Yeah.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Vipin.